learned while doing that, and like what processes we took in order to, I guess, achieve the successful outcome that we did, and what worked and what didn't. So first we'll talk about just the logistics of like getting started. So really the basics, and then like the platforms, because that does seem to be like the biggest cause for concern for most events. Then the tools, like other tools that you can use, as well as having attendee engagement, because that is probably the most important part of a virtual event. So as far as the logistics, I guess it's pretty straightforward, but it's super important to have like a clear vision of what you want to accomplish, especially if you're going from, I guess, hosting an event that was typically or in the past had been done in person, and if you're transforming that into a virtual event, just because it's not necessarily realistic to assume that you're going to be able to incorporate every single aspect of the former version into the new version. And so if you have a clear vision of what you want to accomplish, I guess you'll be able to work towards that more directly, and then also you'll be able to determine which, I guess, aspects you're willing to, I guess, maybe leave out, and which ones you absolutely have to, I guess, keep. And so that's pretty much that. And then I guess in terms of like the specificities for that, really just starting off with the basics, so the who, what, where, and how. And so figuring out, first of all, the scope, just because obviously with the virtual event, you're able to reach a much larger population. So you could have it be regionally, provincially, nationally, or even internationally. For Legacy, for example, we had people from Canada, the States, the UK, Ireland, Kenya, India, Myanmar, and a few other cool places. So that was really interesting to experience. Next, I guess also considering, is it going to be an interclub event? Will it be campus-wide? Will it be campuses across Canada? Same kind of thing. Next, in terms of what, so what's the context of the event? Is it a webinar, a conference like this one, a case crack, for example? Then where, so on which platform, and how, meaning like through which means. So is it something that's going to be organized by the team, or maybe like by a third party? So next point is like having a why, and it kind of comes back to the same point I shared, but I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Simon Sinek's golden circle theory, but it's really just people don't buy, I guess, what you're doing or what you do, but rather why you do it. And so it's the same thing, that if you have a mission statement and something that you're always able to come back to with your team, to make sure you're heading in the right direction, it's always easier to have like a concrete result and kind of be able to measure if you were able to produce the effects that you were wanting to. All right, so next, let's talk a bit about leverage. So getting people to attend like a normal event is difficult, but it's like somewhat difficult. But getting people to attend a virtual event is even more so difficult. And in my experience with Legacy, people weren't necessarily justifying, either like they wouldn't justify or they just didn't want to justify buying like a ticket for an event in which they would have to attend like from their home. And so this is where it became really important for us to put emphasis on what factors were, I guess, going to be happening at this virtual event as opposed to the in-person one. And so obviously they're specific to the event, so it's something that has to be determined by a team like themselves. But some of the big ones are that, I guess, people don't have to physically get up or dress up to attend, because they can do it from the comfort of their home. There's more flexibility regarding personal attendance, and also communication between members can be sometimes, I guess, more awkward, but also a lot more spontaneous, which is pretty advantageous. And so another important thing to keep in mind is that I mentioned this a bit earlier, but you do have the possibility for a larger like target market if it's applicable to your event. And so putting emphasis on the fact that people are going to get to meet people from maybe across the province, across Canada, or even in different countries can be super beneficial. And I guess in terms of doing this, it's not always easy, especially if you don't know necessarily like someone who's in another continent. And so what can be done here is, I guess, just reach out. So something we did a lot on Legacy is, well, first there was a growth team, and what they would do is just they'd find people that would be good fits for brand ambassadors, partners, sponsors, which is also BD, of course, and even just influencers that fit the profile of someone who like would be a good attendee at the event, and someone who kind of lived by the values of the event. And so we just reach out to them and explain that we want them to be part of this, and then like see where that takes us. Obviously, the reply to reach out ratio isn't great. It definitely does take like a lot of work and consistent communication, but it is something that helped, and it was, I guess, what generated a lot of international tickets for us. So that was pretty cool. All right, next for platforms. So platforms are definitely like the main cause for concern for virtual events, just because there are a couple of different kinds, and the prices varied, and as well as their functionalities. And so, like what I did is I just compiled a table of the three most, I guess, widely used platforms, and then I guess with their benefits and I guess like features and stuff. And so the first one is Zoom. There are like three different plans. I guess I'll let you guys look at this individually, maybe take a picture if you'd like, but um, events that aren't necessarily multifaceted, so that are kind of like, let's say like one thing happening in one room at a time, like this event. So we had the main room, then we got broken out into this one. Zoom is like fantastic for that, just because the prices are fairly reasonable. So most clubs or individuals would be able to, I guess, afford a membership. And it's very user friendly because, well, yeah, just because so many people are familiar with it, which is always a plus. There are limits to like the participant numbers and the limits to the to sessions, so that's something that you have to consider and weigh. But if it's on a multifaceted event, then Zoom is probably the way to go. Next for Hoppin. So Hoppin is kind of a platform that's used for larger events. It's what Legacy used, for example. And the reason is because you get charged like 50 cents per ticket based on the plan, and then as well as a platform fee. So for it to be worth it, you kind of have to have a certain amount of people. But it's great because you can have different things going on at the same time, which aids in like event cohesiveness. Because if ever there's a technical difficulty somewhere, people are able to. I guess we're able to, I guess, like nudge people to go participate in other activities happening elsewhere. For example, say the stage wasn't working, the main stage, then people could go to the expo booth to see companies, or maybe to the networking to talk to people, and so on. And this does have live support as well, which is always a plus. And then finally, Microsoft Teams. Most people are fairly familiar with this as well, just because it's been used in a couple of classrooms. Um, it's kind of the same thing as Zoom, but not as developed, I'd say, in the sense that the features aren't, yeah, like there aren't as many, but it's still pretty great. You can have like a good amount of participants, and the prices are fairly reasonable, which is always a plus. All right. Oops. So next for tools. So just as you have to, I guess, make sure that the attendees are like everything's cohesive in that regard, you also have to do the same for your team. So a big part of like virtual event planning is making sure that every single person of the team is on the same page and knows what's going on. And so a big part of my role on Legacy was just making sure that everything was coming together seamlessly, and so that every different facet of the conference was kind of on the same level at the same time. And so 4 tools that really helped us do that were Asana, Basecamp, Trello, and Notion. And Asana and Basecamp are really just task assigning platforms. Like, for example, you can have like a table and write everything that needs to be done and have them all in the same place. There's also like a work map that you can have, so to have a clear visual. And then for Trello, this was mainly for reach out. So every time someone would contact a speaker, for example, they would annotate that within the Trello to be able to see how many times a certain person had been contacted, when they were contacted, and of course by whom. And this does have an automated, I guess, bot inserted, kind of like Slack as well. So that was always kind of entertaining. And then as far as Notion, it's really just a platform to be able to have all of your, I guess, information together. Drive works just as well, but Notion does have a couple of cool templates that help in, I guess, like deciphering one thing from another. For example, like a checklist to a maybe like an essay format on how to do a certain thing, like research, for example. So that was fun to use as well. but yeah, just to stress this point that because I guess in COVID time, people organizing a virtual event are coming together from different, I guess, areas. It's not always easy to be on the same page. So making sure that everyone always knows what's going on when is super important for the, I guess, the conference outcome. All right, so now let's talk about engagement. So this is what I'd say, like, arguably one of the most important aspects of a virtual event, just because there's not, well, I guess, like in an in-person event, there's a certain connectivity between people, and because everyone's, I guess, is seeing each other from a computer screen, that's not always the case. And so there are a couple of things that have to be done in order to make sure that people are always interacting during an event. And I guess it depends on the nature of it too. Like, for example, if you were holding like a case study, you wouldn't necessarily want people to be participating when other people are presenting. So it depends, but yeah, you just want to make sure that people are coming back from the breaks, that they aren't passively listening, or that they're not always like multitasking, for example. And so in order to do this, there are like tools that are offered by platforms. For example, on Zoom, you have the option to create polls, ask like questions and such. But on its own, those won't necessarily get you the outcome that would be like equivalent to an in-person event per se. And so I guess you have to be creative, organized, and consistent, and use these tools in order to create, I guess, your own means of creating engagement or creating your own games. And so something we did for Legacy, well, I guess I'll just go through the, I guess, how-tos, but create incentives. So offering prizes is obviously a good thing to do, just because it forces people to come back. And so what we did were just $15 like e-gift cards to Amazon, for example, just because it's practical, everyone can use them, and they can be sent off in minutes, even seconds, which is really cool. And we wouldn't offer these to every single, like for every single question or poll, but if it were on like an important part of the conference, so for example, coming back from a break where people would maybe have or consider leaving the event within that 15 minutes, we'd give them like a cliffhanger question and then ask them to type in their answer when they came back. And that's when they'd have the chance to win that gift card. We didn't see obviously as much success with some activities as we did for others. But another great thing that worked were just random polls and short answer questions. So if ever there was a delay with technology, or if the speaker maybe there just didn't seem to be engagement, or like a good response as to what a speaker was saying, we just type in an answer, not an answer, but like a question, and ask for people's opinions in regards to something specific. And these questions were always in relation to like what was going on. So for example, if the speaker was speaking about marketing, it would be something like, for example, his books, or just a marketing question, something of the sort. So research did have to be done beforehand, and it's something that had to be compiled and nicely organized so that when the event did arise to need to do this, you could just copy paste it and share it. And that was very beneficial to the success of the event. Next, calls to action. So these are similar to the situations where we would give gift cards, but asking people to, I guess, think about something and come back to us in 10-15 minutes with an answer so we could have like a concrete discussion. And then two other important parts are knowing your audience and having an engaged, I guess you could call them a mic coordinator or just a coordinator. But knowing your audience is important because obviously I guess you want to be asking questions that they'll be not excited to answer, but willing to answer and somewhat knowledgeable about. And so I guess just doing research about who's coming, from where they're coming, what are their interests, and so on. And then having an engaged mic coordinator in the sense that everything's always more fun when someone's like enthusiastic and really liking what they're doing. And so, yeah, that's always a plus. And so I guess just for a couple of concrete examples, for Legacy, we did, I guess, what we called booth bingo, as well as like a golden egg hunt. And so throughout the event, we had assigned certain people who were interclub members with golden eggs, and if they were, I guess, if they spoke to a certain amount of people, or if they spoke to someone whom they thought were really engaged, they would give out this egg, and then the egg winner would win a prize. And then another thing we did was booth bingo. And so with something like Hoppin, for example, you can have a whole bunch of different organizations within the expo booth. And so booth bingo meant going to every single expo, speaking to people, and then having them, if the I guess the booth host thought that you were engaged, they'd give you that word, and then you'd complete the sheet. And then people who completed the sheet just send it in to us, and then we rewarded prizes for that. And that's something that was fairly well received, but again, it takes a bit of effort for people to do, and so you just have to stress the fact that it is worth it and that there's a prize. All right, next, I guess we'll talk about preparing for tech troubles. So technology can be like a hit or a miss sometimes, and so it's always best to be familiar with the platform that you're using. I guess if it's Zoom, people are generally somewhat familiar with it, so that's okay. But something that we did was 3 different trial runs. So we did a tech trial on our own. And so this was, well, I guess I'll start with the inter-club event, just because we kind of simulated a smaller version of Legacy, and we hosted that within Enactus. And so we were able to see to which degree the platform was, I guess, like cohesive with what we were trying to do, how well people were able to maneuver their way around the platform, and if to what extent there were like lags and stuff like that. And that's something that was great. After we did that, we were able to send out a formula asking people, a questionnaire asking how they thought it had gone, and so we were able to use that data and apply it to our actual event a month later. And that was just in regards to like the technology, cohesiveness, connectivity, all that good stuff. Next, the tech trial. So this was, I guess, like a week or so before the event, and we just went through the platform on our own as if it were the real Legacy event, just to be able to like familiarize ourselves with the platform, and yeah, just really just get used to it. And then we had an inter-team event, which is, again, just a Legacy on a smaller version, and this was the day before. And so if you are hosting, I guess, like a larger scale event with many team members, it's always beneficial for each team member to know exactly what they're doing and what they have to do and when, as well as like 3 backup options to that in the event that something doesn't work, for example, because it's important to recognize that everyone will have their individual roles, so people won't be able to necessarily assist others in doing so, because that would jeopardize the results of the event. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I guess that's it for that. How are we doing so far? Everyone's good? Okay, cool. Okay, so next for cohesiveness. So this is arguably one of the most important, I guess, with attendee engagement things about virtual conferences, because something that doesn't have a lot of flow to it can be, I guess, not so fun, and just in the sense that you don't always know what's going on. It might not be like clear and stuff like that. And so making sure that there's like a nice fluidity to the event is something that we stress a lot at Legacy. And so the ways to do this are to, of course, like minimize delays. So if, for example, you have a speaker and you're transitioning that speaker over to another speaker, doing so as quick as possible, not as quick as possible, but as fluid as possible without, for example, having a delay to one from another. And if there is a delay, just being prepared to engage the audience with those questions we talked about earlier. And having multiple facets. So this is something, again, that can really only be applied to a larger scale event. But if you're using Hoppin, for example, and something goes wrong on the main stage, just telling people to hop on over to the next, next event, not next event, but like next facet, and familiarizing themselves with that aspect of it, and then coming back to this one later on when the kinks are worked out. And then finally, just having activities prepared, so engagement, to stress the engagement. So next we're going to talk about, I guess, like really figuring out what works and what doesn't work for the event. And so for virtual events, I guess it's important to have a clear description of who your audience is going to be and what they came to the event to experience. And so what we did at Legacy is, I mentioned this a bit before, but really just a survey asking what people, I guess, were looking for and what they had liked from our previous events. and then ways in which we can incorporate that into our new events. So we asked for their opinions. We had a lot of brainstorming sessions with regard, always obviously keeping track of our main goal and our main, like our why, so connectivity. And so that's something that helped us, I guess, have a clear definition of what we were going to accomplish when it came to the real date. So that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope that was helpful. And if you guys have any questions, please, I guess, feel free to share them now, and I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you so much, Deus. That was very insightful, honestly. I think, yeah, definitely like other people appreciate it as well. So you guys can start like putting your questions in the chat. I know like the last workshop I was in, we had like a whole conversation, like a whole bunch of questions were asked. So go ahead, go all out with your questions. I'll start off with a question for you, Deus. What was like kind of the like the coolest part about like doing legacy for the first time virtually? Was it like something that you guys had to like completely shift your mindset towards, we have to like do this all online now?
Yeah, great question. So it was actually kind of interesting. Like at first we kind of thought about doing a hybrid event, so having it be half in person, half virtual, and that's kind of before we knew that there was going to be a second wave for sure. But once we kind of came to terms with the fact that it was going to be virtual 100%, it was kind of exciting, really, because we're opening doors for future legacies. And so I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but it's something that's been happening for 10 years. Today, not today, but this year was our 10th anniversary. So the fact that we were able to incorporate everything that past legacies had been into this one, and then maybe open doors for future legacies to be both hybrid or virtual, that was pretty exciting to experience.
That's really cool. How did you guys choose to use? You guys used Hoppin, right?
Yeah, we used Hoppin.
How did you guys like choose that over like the other platforms?
Yeah, so that's something that Sally, I guess, weighed like heavily. We knew that we had to have something that would support like a larger audience, and something that was, of course, like reasonably priced, just because we are a student club. And so Hoppin was kind of the best like middle ground between both of those aspects, and we were able to get a lot of support from their team, I guess, helping us both manage the event during it, but also setting it up and providing like explanations to the tech trials. So that's something that I guess affected our decision heavily.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. We have a question here that says, "What would the hybrid event would like? What would it look like?"
All right, so so hybrid would be like half in person and half virtual, and it's not something that we took too much time to, I guess, figure out, just because we kind of came to the conclusion pretty quickly that it was going to be virtual. But really, it would have been we would have had a production team at our venue, so the Aberdeen Pavilion initially, and then maybe broadcasting all the speakers from that event. So still to, I guess, generate like the feeling of legacy in the big space, but most attendees doing it from home.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Um, we have another question here about like Hopin, the platform and stuff. So someone said, can you explain the pricing model again? And how long does it take to set Hopin up for a complex event with large attendees?
Yeah, sure. So the Hoppin was, I have it right here. I can even go back to the slide, maybe if you guys want to screenshot that. But really, the way it works is that you pay like a service fee for the platform of 7%, I think, without including Stripe fees, which is like the platform that associates the ticket sales. So it's where you can see all your finances. And then if you're on the basic plan, for every ticket over, like once you pass 100, you have to pay 50 cents on that, and then the fee will come out of that. So like Hoppin will take a chunk of that. It didn't affect us too much. Like we were still pretty profitable, so it was totally okay. And then as far as setting up, they have a pretty interactive like page, and so this isn't something that I'm too familiar with, just because Sally, our director, is the one who handled it. But it was as simple as having like, I think, just 2 calls with them, and then she kind of got an explanation as to how it would work, and what the format would be, and also like what features we needed and which ones we didn't, just to get a better idea of what was going to fit our event. And then from there, we set up like the tech trial event, which we were able to use a couple of months later. And then the team was always there to answer questions if we had any. So it was a good experience.
Nice. Let me see. I saw another question um, about features on Hoppin. I guess like why would you choose Hoppin versus like the other platforms? What kind of features do they have that other platforms don't?
For sure, yeah. So Hoppin had some things called, so they have a reception stage, session, network, and expo. And what this means is that like I can actually bring you guys to the legacy Hoppin page if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
So what this means is that when you come to Hoppin here, that's not what I wanted. First you're brought to a main page, which would be this. And then what we liked about this is that there was a landing page so that people would come in to the main event and then not be, I guess, necessarily bombarded with a whole bunch of information right away. They can kind of ease themselves into the event. And then from there, they could go to the main stage, which would be here. And so I'm on the back end right now, so this is what you're seeing, but normally it would be like a screen like Zoom. And then the networking sessions expo. And so these are just different facets of the event where people could go in. And then, for example, the expo were all our different like companies that were there. The sessions were where we had set up our networking. So we associated Squarespace scheduling with Hoppin, and we were able to integrate both platforms together, which is really cool. And then so it's just all these different parts on the end, as opposed to just having two rooms that are only moderated by the event hosts. So it really just gives it a little bit more flexibility to the attendees to do kind of what they want, almost like in an in-person event. Like they're not constricted to what's going on the screen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think it's pretty clear that like Hoppin was like a good choice for your event. What kind of a platform would you recommend for someone who wants to do an event that's not really like a networking kind of event? It's more just like everybody's watching the same thing at once. I guess like you mentioned other platforms, and maybe Hoppin might not be the best idea. Maybe it would. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think for something where everything's kind of going on at once, I feel like Zoom would definitely be the best option for that, just because, again, like people are really familiar with it. So there wouldn't be like too many surprises, if that makes sense. And also, it's easy to moderate, and it's fairly like reasonably priced to use. So it's not something that, like, obviously, like the easier the better, right? So if Zoom works, definitely go with Zoom because everyone's familiar with it and you know how to use it. If you need something that's a little bit larger, go for something like Hoppin. There are also like a couple of other options like WebCX, I think, and things of the sort. But there are really a whole bunch of options, and it's just a matter of, I guess, doing the research and then compiling the information that's pertinent to your event, really.
That's cool. Awesome. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat right now. I'll just put the giveaway in the chat again, just for you guys to have access to that. But yeah, I think it doesn't look like we have any other questions, so I guess we're gonna end it here. But I just want to thank Deus for her time and putting on a really amazing workshop. I think we could all benefit from it, especially because you've been through this. The rest of us haven't, and I think a lot of people are gonna start moving their events virtually. Yeah, but thank you so much. Honestly, it was a really good workshop.
No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fun and rewarding experience. So if you guys are thinking about it, definitely go for it. And the worst that will happen is that it won't be as cohesive as planned, but you can always work towards that. So it's not an issue at all.
Yeah, that's awesome. So right now it's almost 12, so we're gonna have like a small lunch break, about 45 minutes, and then the last set of workshops is gonna be at 12:45. So you guys can come back around 12:40, 12:45, and then we can continue. But yeah, everybody enjoy your break, and yeah, we'll see you later. Thank you, Deus.
Perfect, no problem. Bye, guys.